Welcome to the Founders, Futurists, and Failures podcast. I am your host, Connor Flynn, and today we have two guests, Ilari Lindy and Kirsten Vito. Ilari is the lead expert at the Southern African Innovation Support Program, and Kirsten is the co-founder and director of Fab Lab Namibia. The SICE program is a regional initiative set up in 2011 to enhance innovation cooperation in Southern Africa by strengthening the national systems. The Fab Lab Design and Technology Center is the first advanced manufacturing, prototyping, and design lab in Namibia and the largest Fab Lab currently within Africa. Founders, Futurists, and Failures is brought to you by Startup Commons and Entrepreneurship. Startup Commons is dedicated to digitizing and connecting startup ecosystems globally to scale entrepreneurship, innovation, and business creation around the world. Startup Commons provides digital connectivity and solutions to enable data-driven economic development and policymaking for local ecosystems. Entrepreneurship is working to prepare the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders for careers in startups, impact investing, and economic development. You can support this podcast by purchasing Founders, Futurists, and Failures t-shirts at entrepreneurship.com/shop. Now, let's chat with Ilari and Kirsten to learn about entrepreneurship ecosystems, regional collaboration, and inclusive innovations.
Ilari, what is the Southern African Innovation Support Program?
Thanks for the question, Connor. South Africa Innovation Support Program, SICE, or SICE2 as we call it. It's a 4-year initiative supported by the government of Finland, more specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and 5 other governments from the Southern African region, namely the governments of Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, South Africa, and Tanzania. So it is an initiative which is implemented as a program, and the focus of this program called SICE is on supporting entrepreneurship, early stage, and perhaps stronger ecosystems of innovation that supports entrepreneurs through matching grants, capacity building, and knowledge exchange, where we are networking the different organizations and collaborate together on joint projects and similar type of activities.
Excellent. And Kirsten, what is Fab Lab?
So, hi Connor. Fab Lab is actually part of a network of over 1,000 labs, and it stands for Fabrication Laboratory, so making things in essence. And the first Fab Lab actually started at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was actually way up in the north in Europe, in Iceland. And since then, a lot of them have sprung up everywhere. And we're the first one in Namibia with our headquarters in Windhoek. But contrary to the traditional model of a Fab Lab, we're actually something more of a hybrid. So we also do startup support and incubation, and not just working with students for prototyping, but also, taking a little bit further than that and advancing the support to be a little bit more inclusive.
Great. So what activities can organizations pursue to develop local innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems?
This is really where SICE is located, and this is what the program by and large is about. So when you look at the SICE and the different instruments, grants which we are providing for successful applicants, these are addressing 3 different areas in broader sense, which support all the local innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. Call for proposal window, as we call it. It's targeted to support various type of knowledge and learning activities. So the different organizations organizations who have interest to support innovation and entrepreneurship, they can come together and think about that. How could we actually be stronger in our work when we are helping the entrepreneurs actually to develop their own businesses, their own services, but also policymakers and other type of actors who are supporting entrepreneurs themselves. So knowledge activities could be something, for example, how do we map ecosystems in particular cities? How do we then, through mapping, learn who are the actors who work together, play together? What kind of incentives are being provided for each of the actors in their own work and so forth? The second window, what we have in SIZE program, is a window where we are giving grants to the innovation support organizations, like Fab Lab, for example, who are working with the early stage entrepreneurs, who are already advising and who are coaching them, but also giving them other type of support. So in this case, we would like to see that perhaps there could be several Fab Labs or other type of organizations, incubators, accelerators, tech transfer offices, or networks that can come together and start networking their constituencies to the joint activities. To understand, as a startup, I could roll out my service in the ecosystem, which is located in a different city, perhaps even across the border, and so forth. So little by little, building the knowledge and understanding on the ecosystems and networks, not only in your own locality, but also across the border. And bringing this knowledge also together for the organizations like hubs, labs, and incubators, that they can actually start sharing and understanding what works in what kind of a context and what doesn't. And then the third window, what we have is a window that supports inclusive innovation. So more or less similar type of activities, but which has a particular angle that looks at innovation, so new or improved products, services, or processes that are particularly servicing to the, for some reason, excluded, socially or economically excluded parts of the population. So I think here we are also looking at how do we learn and how do we understand those mechanisms that allow us as an entrepreneur or as a support organizations to better provide services to the poorest part of the population, for example. I don't know, Kirsten, if you want to take it from here.
Sure, I'll jump in there. So I think for us, it's really about building the critical mass. So we've been operating the lab since 2013 when we founded it. And, since then it was really quite, let's say there wasn't much happening at the time. So looking at building that critical mass and then having a space that's really creative has been something that has showcased, the value of that and the impact that provides, as well as giving new technology skills. So when we opened the lab, it was the first 3D printer as an example, whereas, the rest of the world was already quite advanced with 3D printing technology and digital fabrication. And looking at these new technologies and being organic as well. So moving with the times, because technology and everything is changing so quickly that if we're looking at developing a local innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem, we have to be aware of the trends and technology and skills that people need to actually acquire to progress. So that from the Fab Lab point of view is kind of the bottom line.
Excellent. So that's very interesting how Fab Lab fits into the second window of the SIZE program's grants. And so you also touched on how cross-border collaboration can be used, Ilari. So could you please elaborate a little bit on how regional or cross-border collaboration can be used to strengthen innovation ecosystems?
Yes. So again, taking it a little bit from the SIZE perspective and the way SIZE grants are allocated. So we supporting projects, and these would be a project, say a duration anywhere between 18 to 24 months, that also have the element of market validation on it. So all the activities what we hope to support needs to be activities that are already thought to be something that could be beneficial for your innovation communities or your users, consumers, even on similar type of ecosystems that where, say, Fab Lab has already been working here in Windhoek. So for us really to invest on a project itself, it also allows us to support innovation support organizations and entrepreneurs, how they can learn about different markets, but also different cultures, different instruments, and different incentives that are supporting ecosystems in a different context. And also on top of that, when we are really supporting projects on a cross-border scale, it also allows them to maybe learn about practices, what are the peculiarities in this type of activities, and provide a little bit learning in that respect as well. So I hope this could be just a short glimpse on our thinking. I know Kirsten probably wants to say something else on this as well.
Always. So yeah, from Fab Lab, I think we've been working quite tirelessly at building the local ecosystem. So that's really the first step before we can really branch out to any of the other ecosystems. And obviously, there's a lot of knowledge sharing between our countries just over the borders. So from Namibia to Zambia and South Africa and Botswana. But I think the value as well for our startups at the moment, so we have 3 incubated with us. One is kind of the Namibian Uber context. One is a low-cost toilet for the rural areas. And then the other one is hardware, so a small form factor computer. So that's actually really nice for them to actually get that opportunity to be able to look at the markets in the outer lying countries. And we're a small population in Namibia. We're just over 2 million. And in Windhoek, just over 300,000. So if you consider that, having access to your ecosystems across the borders will really give a bigger kind of market-raising change in those startups' lives, I think, in the long run.
But maybe I also, just to add on what Kirsten said, is that it's also, at least in the interest of size, to see that these projects which are implemented by group of organizations, so consortiums as we call them, that these are also a bit more versatile than one size fits all. So we very much welcome, for example, a partnership where let's say an innovation hub or an accelerator is teaming up with the city hall in one particular city, or teaming up with already existing bigger industry organization, for example. And of course, not to mention that the academia, university, and research organizations have a valuable role to play in this type of consortiums in providing understanding, but also providing maybe methods on how you document and how do you report and analyze your activities and data collected. And similar way, we are also looking to see that civil society organizations, who often are working very much feet on the ground and with that kind of knowledge, can bring first-hand understanding on how to, for example, design services and products to the population that might be excluded for some reason.
Great. So Kirsten and Ilari, how do Fab Lab and SICE catalyze ecosystem development?
Okay, so from the Fab Lab side, I think when we started off, we were mainly just training people in product development, labeling, design, and things like that. But our model has sort of expanded from there, and we look at, on the one hand, knowledge and skills that can transform ideas into actual tangible products, and then we look at things like information sharing. We also have quite a good success rate of internships, which are exploding into them traveling all over the world and being incubated in foreign incubation facilities, amongst getting jobs in big organizations as well. And the incubation and reputation of that, so how the support is really fostering change. And then we have initiatives like Pitch Night, which we did with SICE, where the winners get the chance to go to Slush, which is the amazing Europe startup conference in Helsinki, Finland. But all these types of platforms, really give exposure, and we've seen a lot of transformation over the past 2 or 3 years from the first pitching evenings where the startups were very, still quite weak in the way they were pitching, I guess you could say. And in the long run, every year that we've been running, there's been a lot of improvement, and we've even started opening those platforms to the public and other, pitchers who haven't really made it into the top quotient yet. And those guys are actually then learning from one another. So there's really a system growing and expanding, which is quite nice. So that's part of catalyzing, I think, the ecosystem development in Namibia.
Maybe then size, the approach as a program is that we really are looking to see that how that kind of a champions and the players who already play that kind of a connector role in a different ecosystems, that how we can actually support them. So oftentimes the first beneficiaries of size grants might be entrepreneurs, but the grants themselves are being channeled through organizations that work as sort of an intermediary role or innovation support organization. And this simply because through them, of course, the networks might be wider. And we want to see that these kind of organizations who play the focal role, and these need to be strengthened, and these need to be emphasized in their own work, and that's why the approach which we have taken. Maybe the second important point is that every time when organizations are implementing a project supported by size, they need to be aware of the fact that what are they doing and how they are doing. So monitoring and evaluating what they are doing in order to understand that they are doing the right things and they are doing the right things in the right way. And if they're not, they can actually then come back, rectify and do it again. So this type of learning by doing, but documenting is a critical element of size project. And we are also very much emphasizing the fact that it needs to be documented, and you may fail in something, but you may succeed wildly in some other things. But the important then, by documenting, you are able to learn, and you are able to share that lessons of learn with your colleagues. So understanding really that how do the ecosystem work better for the benefit of all.
Yes, documentation definitely accelerates the learning process and contributes to the sharing of best practices. So, Ilari, earlier you touched on inclusive innovations. So what exactly are inclusive innovations?
So, Connor, thanks for the question. And of course, there are different, say, perhaps schools of thought that when we are referring to the inclusive innovations, and in size, we are looking this in a two different angle. The one is that who are your beneficiaries, who are excluded for social or economical, or could be even reasons that are related to the geography. So this could be a one group of population. Many ways we can also say that if you are working and developing your skills as say a female coder or girl coder, you may not always be in the same groups and let's say in the same within the vicinity of the same kind of incentives that then often maybe your male colleagues are. So again, seeing there something that comes from demographic. But for us also important is it means that when somebody is designing something, testing and trialing, validating your service or your product, that you are doing it together with the users, with the consumers, and perhaps with those organizations that can help you to bring the innovation to the market. So the approach itself should be collaborative and imply and use techniques like co-creation, design thinking, just simply to better understand that what does your market really want. And of course, through this, not to waste your money on something which really doesn't have any resonance with the users.
Right. So, Kirsten, do you have any
I think
take on this?
Sure. I think from our side, we aren't necessarily discriminating against who we take into any of our programs, but we do realize, a core focus is looking at a long-term strategy of the youth. So, there's a major gap between kids that we work with from our rural areas that we take in for robotics, as an example. And, we've noticed that between the more high income earners, family households compared to these kids, they're so much more open and already quite creative and really friendly to one another versus the high income kids, which are a little bit more difficult to work with. And, you can tell there's a lot of barriers that they've built up already. So I think for us, the long-term strategy is looking at taking kids from the rural and informal settlements and giving them the skills in critical thinking, access to a creative space, collaborative work on, in the STEAM fields, and then obviously robotics, so that we're giving them a fighting chance of developing new inventions for the future. So that's something that we're really passionate about, and I think that's going to make a lot of change when we look at what these kids are doing in a few years' time when they're actually in high school and graduating. So that's something that I think we believe will actually foster inclusive innovation for the future as well. And I think it's also important that they have to show commitment and a willingness to, learn and grow in the environment. So we always make sure that when we run these programs, we take the youth out of their natural habitat and take them into our lab where you can, write all over the walls and feel like you actually could invent anything that you could imagine. And I think even though not all those things will work in the long run, out of 20 ideas, one great idea will be born and new industries will also be born at the same time.
maybe I can just follow up Kirsten on this one, because I think she said important thing there that maybe not everything what we plan and which we test and trial will work in the longer run, but importantly so some of the ideas which we drop, somebody else may take up and take forward in a different place with a different angle for the use. So inclusiveness also really means that there is a community there which can work with an innovator, and oftentimes when we are developing something, the thinking could be in a shared value, because once we are in the innovation process, the different players get different benefits out of it. And it's this type of activity which relates very well to the fostering or strengthening the ecosystems that SIZE as a program would also like to advocate.
Right. And so on the subject of advocating ecosystem development, how can our listeners get involved with SIZE and Fab Lab?
Well, from Fab Lab, we are a tangible invention hub, so you kind of have to come to the lab pretty much. So you could become a member. Otherwise, obviously, following us on social media and getting involved in any way possible would be great. We always look for any international collaborations where people would like to come and share their skills and upskill our current incubatees, or come and work with the kids that we're working with. So if anybody has any digital fabrication skills or metrics and evaluation skills would be great, because coming from a creative hub, we've all mentioned, tracking your impact and the data. And from a creative point of view, it's like killing your creative soul. So, that those skills are always wanted in our lab. And basically visit us. I think you can see what we're doing and take part in the Namibian ecosystem.
Well, I think Kirsten's just said that most important thing. And in many ways, SIZE is a program which really supports innovation support organization. So if your listeners want to get involved and want to get benefit from SIZE, the safest way is really to contact on this type of organizations who are playing this role. And of course, it's worthwhile to mention that there is a geographical limitations with SIZE. So we are really targeting first and not necessarily foremost, but first to the area which is comprised in the countries that are within Southern African Development Community vicinity. And within these countries, we are also emphasizing that the first comers will be entities that are registered entities within the SIZE. So 5 partner countries, which I mentioned, that are Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, and South Africa. SAIS grants, for example, can though come outside of these 5 countries, come outside of SADC, can come anywhere else in the African continent, and also anywhere in the world. But there is a cap. Not more than 10% of the all allocated grant can be forwarded to support any entities that come outside of the SADC region. But SAIS itself has other type of activities that we support by bringing the different organizations globally even together. So there are social media activities. We are happy to use all our digital platforms and newsletters to promote good practices regardless where do they come, and encourage networking. Obviously, we are a program that focuses on certain geography, but we do understand that not everything happens in this geography, but a lot of things happens outside. So we are happy to build these bridges as well.
Wonderful. Okay, Ilari and Kirsten, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Connor.
Thanks, Connor.